All right. So we can see this welcome to NGINX when we load our public IP address, okay, for our public EC2 instance. However, that's not really what we want to be doing completely. What we want to do is we want to have our application, the one that we're actually viewing, we want to have that in the private EC2 instance. And we want to use the public EC2 instance. Instead of seeing this NGINX homepage, we want to use the NGINX as a reverse proxy server and redirect the traffic to our public instance. The reason why we want to do that is because instances within a VPC can talk to each other freely, right? So if we go back to our VPC, we can read more about that. Deploy in public VPC. Okay, and then if you go to route tables, you're going to have our public route table. And you can see that local traffic is part of the public route table. And if you noticed, we have our default route table that is for everything in the VPC. And you can see that local traffic within the VPC is allowed. So our public instance can communicate with our private instance. So eventually the goal is to have NGINX redirect to serving what is in the private instance, the application that's in there. However, we're not quite ready to do that because there's nothing in our private instance. And as we saw in the last video, we can't even SSH into the private instance in order to install something, because remember, SSH is like opening your computer and being able to log in, and then you look at the files, download, and do things. Okay, so there's still some work to be done. So how do you get into a private EC2 instance if it's in a private subnet? Well, that's where we use a bastion host. So a bastion host is going to be another instance, another EC2 instance. And the bastion host, the whole point of it, so we're going to say DIP, so deploy in public, bastion host. The whole point of the bastion host is just to forward traffic, allow us into our private instance. So we're going to SSH into our bastion host, okay, which is going to be a little computer, and then we're SSH from our bastion host into our private instance. And why can we do that? Because the bastion host will be in the VPC, the private instance will be in the VPC, and two instances within the same VPC can talk to each other automatically. I hope that makes sense. Okay. If it doesn't, Google bastion host, start looking into some of the resources that I've tagged. Okay. So we can use Amazon Linux again. We can keep this as T2 micro. For our key pair, I'm going to go ahead and use the same key pair. All right. And then we're going to create our security group. So our bastion host, the only point of the bastion host is that we can SSH into it. Okay. So we want to allow traffic. Okay. SSH traffic. And then we want to allow it from our IP address. Okay. I'm trying to look because I feel like, so I want to edit the VPC. I always forget that part. So we're doing our deploy in public VPC. We will need a public IP address for the bastion host. And then we're going to create a security group, and we are going to call it bastion host security group. And let's call it like deploy in public bastion host security group. Let's copy this security group name and let's paste it into the description too. And we want to be able to SSH into, because it's an inbound security group rule, from my IP address. And we'll add the rule SSH for admin desktop. Okay. The rest should be fine. And then we're going to go ahead and launch the instance. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and open our instance, and you can see it's pending. So we can refresh until it goes. So let's look at it. We have a public IP address, which is good. And let's go make sure our security is good. And yep, we have an inbound rule that we can SSH into it. And then we have the outbound rule that we can, from our bastion host, go anywhere. Okay? Which is nice because we want to be able to do that. All right, let's refresh and see if we can connect, and we can. So we're going to go ahead to the SSH instance here, and we are going to copy this command. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out of that, and then I'm going to, I don't know why it adds some of these extra things sometimes. Okay. And then I'm going to click yes. And we are able to see our bastion host instance. Okay. And that is because it is in our public subnet. So let's go look at the networking tab. Make sure, yep, it's in our public subnet in our DIP VPC. And because it's in the public subnet, then it's connected to that route table, which is connected to the internet gateway and so on. Okay. So we are into our bastion host. All right. So what we want to do then is, from our bastion host, we want to be able to get to our SSH into our private EC2 instance, okay? Because ultimately that's where we want our application to live, and we need a way to be on that computer in order to download our application, download NGINX, and put our application there, okay? Now we need to do something a little bit different in order to get there. We need to be able to we need to be able to save our bastion, our key pair. Okay, we need to be able to save it so that way our computer knows it, and we can go ahead and instead do SSH, and then without doing the -I and the key pair. And the reason why we want to be able to do that is because the key pair is saved. Remember, it's in our downloads folder on our personal computer. Okay, so when I SSH into my bastion host, I'm now on a different computer, so I'm not in my downloads folder anymore. So if I were to try to, so let's actually just go and do this. Whenever you're in doubt of, like, do I understand something, actually try to do it and see if it makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, but do you see how it's saying, like, it's going to go get that key pair? So if I bring this up and it says key pair not accessible. Okay, so what you want to do instead is you want to be able to SSH into it without that, okay? Which we're not going to be able to because we didn't do it right? But the way that we are going to do that is we're going to get rid of the key pair here. We're going to do dash and then a capital A, right? And that is going to allow us to SSH into our bastion host. Maybe. All right, so let's go ahead and look this up. So we want to do SSH into, I already Googled this. All right, let's see if this article is going to tell us how to do it. All right. Yeah, and this kind of shows you it, right? So we have our SSH key on our internet or on our computer, and then we go through our internet gateway, all right, to our EC2 instance with a public IP address, using that public IP address because that's what that is, right? And then we are going to, and that's in our public subnet. And then we want to SSH from this instance into our private instance, okay? So this article, which I'll post for us, let me go ahead and bookmark this so I can remember to post it for you guys. Okay, so here we are going to run this command. So first we want to do SSH -add, then -k, and then we want to do DPI dash, say to save it, yep. And then let's see. The -k and A flags are deprecated and been replaced by that. It says identity added though. Okay, so now let's try to SSH into our bastion host without the key pair, because this should have configured the SSH agent on our computer. And woohoo, we're into our bastion host, okay, without having to add that key pair because it set it up. Okay, so what we need to do though is we need to actually add this -a here, okay? So that way then we can use agent forwarding, okay? So I'm gonna exit out of my bastion host because actually, again, if you're not sure if something will work, then you're gonna want to go ahead and, okay, so this is, let's make sure this is my private. So this is my private instance. So let's go to connect. Let's copy the example. Let's paste it in there. And then we're going to delete the key pair because that doesn't exist. And you can see now it's thinking and it's not going to work. Okay. If it's taking too long, it's not going to work. But what we want to do is we want to use this -a so that way we can make it work. Okay. All right. So now we do -a. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's going into our, I'm getting all my instances confused. So let's go back now. Let's go to the right instance, which is our bastion host. Let's go to connect. Okay, and then we want to SSH into this guy here. All right, so we can say SSH-A and the bastion host. Oh, and I'm already in an EC2 instance here. Which one am I in though? Okay, let's just start from the beginning. SSH-A. So let's start from before we do our -A to verify that we understand how this is going. Okay, so this is our bastion host. Okay, we have SSH'd into it. All right. Now, from our bastion host, we are going to try to SSH into our private instance. Because we didn't use that -A, we are investigating whether or not it's going to work, okay, if we need that -A or not. Okay, so then now I should be able to, well, I shouldn't be able to, but I'm going to try SSH. Then this is my private instance. And perfect, it's not working, okay? So now I'm going to exit out of the bastion host. That's been closed. I'm going to clear my terminal. And I'm going to go back to where my bastion host was, and that's the correct IP address for it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the -A. And now we are into the bastion host, but using the -A. So hopefully that means then that now we are able to SSH into our private instance. And we cannot, and you know what? I already figured out why. Okay, so we need to go look at the private instance and our security rules, okay? So if we go and look at security, we are looking at inbound security rules. Okay, so if you look, it's saying that we can go into this instance from our IP address on port 22 and we can SSH into it. But that's not what we're doing. We are SSHing from our bastion host, not from our IP address. So of course it's not going to work. So what we need to do is we need to go to that security group and we need to edit the inbound rules. So we want to be able to SSH, all right, but we don't want it to be able to SSH into anything. We want to be able to SSH. Oh, okay, I think I need to delete this. So add a rule. We want to be able to SSH, and the source is custom, and then from the security group, from the bastion host security group, is that the one that I clicked? Yes. Okay, and then we're going to save the rules. Okay, so now that's been modified. So if I go back to my terminal and I try again, yay, it works. Okay, so now let's exit out of this so that we're in the private instance. Now we're in the bastion host. So then I'm going to exit out of that. Okay, and then I'm going to clear my terminal. And then I'm going to try to get back into my bastion host and try this all again, but without the flag, so we can prove whether or not we need the flag. And then I'm going to go back to my private instance, and then I'm going to go to my connect, and I'm going to copy, so that way I can SSH or try to into my private, and you can see that it's permission denied. And this is what you should see, right? It's saying that the key is not, we can't use this key. It's not going to work because we didn't use that -A. All right. And we have this -A. So let's go ahead then, and we want to look into SSH-A. What does that mean? Let's maybe SSH-A. Mm-mm-mm. All right, I don't see something super clear, so I'll try to find a better explanation of it. But basically, it's going to allow us to SSH into our private instance from our bastion instance with that -A. I'll try to find a resource and post it on this page once I have that. So now we can exit back out, and then we can go ahead and SSH into our bastion host, and then SSH into our private instance. And yay, we're in our private instance. And you can tell because this is EC2 user with that IP address. And if you look at our private instance, that's the same one. Okay, this was a great next step. This is how you would set up your bastion host. So to clarify, our private EC2 instance is within a private subnet. You cannot connect to it from the internet. You cannot connect to the internet from it. It is locked down. Our public EC2 instance is in a public subnet. The public subnet is connected to a route table and internet gateway, and it can connect to the internet through the internet gateway, and the internet can connect to it through the internet gateway. The bastion host. The bastion host only has one inbound security rule, and that is that we can SSH into it from our IP address. All right. When we SSH into it using the -A flag, then we SSH into it, and we're able to then from there SSH into our private EC2 instance. Okay. Next, we are going to go over how to install NGINX on our private EC2 instance. See you in the next one.